Okay, welcome to the Thursday edition of the Don Cherry's Grapevine podcast. And Dad, this week we're going to talk about one of your favorites, the Boston Bruins, Ricky Middleton.
Ricky Middleton, I remember they just retired. I think last summer they retired his sweater, and it was great. I think only two of us spoke there. I think at the time.
Yeah, they had a big. One thing Boston Bruins do is they do like retirement numbers, and when they celebrated the 11, 20 goal scores, but boy, they do it upright.
Oh, you couldn't believe that 11, 20 goal scores. Of course, if you have to think about that, if you're a coach of a team, I had 20 or more. One guy had 43. Peter McDabb had 43. Any line I put on would get you 20 goals. And I remember one time in Buffalo, we had on John Rattel, who got 20-some goals. We had Bobby Schmatz, who got 20-some goals, and we had Donnie Marcotte. Now, they were a good plus line. They were a real good plus line. And the coach of the other team thought they were our checking line. So he kept taking the French Connection line off. They're like it was the greatest scoring machine that I would go. And every time I put that line on, I said, okay, so I played him the whole game.
So because you didn't want the French Connection on.
Well, I didn't want that line on, I'll tell you that. But Ricky Middleton was unbelievable. This guy, they call him Nifty, and if you saw him play, you call him Nifty. I remember he used to wear those old Langs, too. Remember that?
Yeah.
He wore Langs. Must get into that someday. But I tell you one thing, when he had, and can we play that, you played that little thing about, before we get started on his career and everything, why don't we play that little bit where he retired?
Yeah, so they retired his number last season, and number 16, and we'll have a clip of you and Ricky at, I guess it was right at center ice at the Boston.
Center ice, yeah.
Center ice at the Boston.
It was packed too.
Yeah, at center ice at the Boston Gardens.
Over the next 10 years, I had several good coaches along the way, but it wasn't until I got traded to the Bruins in May of 1976 that I would get my next big break in my career when I met my new coach, Don Cherry. Or Grapes as we call him. Grapes also coached me for 3 years, from 1976 to 79. And let me tell you, we didn't always see eye to eye. Don wanted me to be a more complete two-way hockey player, and the way he was determined to do that was through attrition of ice time. Even though he did play me my first game as a Bruin on a line with future Hall of Famers Jean Rattel and Johnny Busick, and of course I got a hat trick, but then who wouldn't play with those two guys? But Don had a plan to get me out of my comfort zone as a one-dimensional player. And over those 3 years, it worked. I can't thank Don enough for having the patience and the vision to take my game to another level, and for being here tonight to join me as my number 16 is retired. And John, congratulations on receiving the Hockey Legacy Award last night from the New England Sports Museum. Thank you. You know, when they asked me if I wanted to have some old 70s teammates join Don, I had to say no, because I really didn't want to have too many men on the ice again. All right, Grapes, what do you think? You want to say a couple words? All right. Mr. Don Cherry.
And my favorite Marchand, I like that. Anyhow, no, when Harry Sidney phoned me and he said, we got a chance to get Middleton, do you want him? And I said, well, I coached against him in Providence, eh? And I said, he goes that way, but he doesn't go this way. We had to introduce him to the goalie at the end of the season, I'll tell you that. And so what does he do? He goes out the first game and he gets a hat trick. And Harry said, you're in trouble now. Well, I'll tell you, I can't say how fortunate I am to have you here. You were one of the sweethearts on the club. We had a tough club back then. And, well, we did have a tough club. And Kerry O'Reilly led the way. And anyhow, I can't take long. I got to get going. I just want to say listen, you were great. I'm glad I had you, and I'm glad you learned how to play the game the right way. Number 16, one of the best, Ricky Middleton. Thank you very much.
That was you and Ricky when his number was being raised to the rafters in the Boston Gardens. So when Ricky came to Boston, Dad, what didn't you like about his game?
You know, I was at Team Canada. I have to tell you the story. I was at Team Canada. And I come back, and Harry had taken, they were at training camp, and Harry had taken the first week. And I looked at him. He looked like Porky Pig. I mean, you couldn't believe how heavy he was. So I don't want to get on him right away. So I call him over, and guys are taking shots, and I said, hey, "You look a little big, Ricky. What did you lift a lot of weights?" He says, "No, I just had a good summer." I knew I was in trouble right off the bat. And you, Cindy, you remember? You remember when he didn't cover the points of the Boston
I
Gardens?
remember that like it was yesterday. And it was, in fact, you don't see it very much anymore in the rinks where the whole crowd feels sorry for one player, because you had the team very disciplined about guarding.
In our end.
Oh, and you guarding those points. If you deviated more than 6 or 7 feet, to go in the corners, look out. And one time he left his post, and the guy shot it from the point, and it went in. And there was a hush in the crowd. And everyone was,
the whole crowd knew that you should have covered the points.
Everyone knew that it was his fault. He left the point, so he's skating really slow back with his head down to the bench. And you had a habit of opening up the gate and having your hands on your hips, and you knew he was going to get it. And everyone in the rink was watching, and you start on him with your head bobbing, and he sits down, and you are just on his ear. And my mom and I are sitting and thinking, and Mom actually felt sorry for him. She said, "Look at him. Look at your father down there. You don't think he feels bad? You don't think he feels bad? I mean, this." And it was funny.
We had him one time in Buffalo. This was in Buffalo. I had him. He was covering the points pretty good. He was, it was pretty good. In Buffalo.
Well, that was your thing. Your whole thing was your wingers were covering the points. That's all you wanted them to do.
It's all I had. Just cover the points.
Don't ask for much.
That's not asking much. So he was a pretty good guy. So he's covering a guy, Bill Hite. Remember, he played for Buffalo. Great big guy.
Yeah,
big
tall guy.
I think he got 1 goal in about 4 years. So the other point never covered the point. He didn't cover the point, and he left Bill Hite and went over, and sure enough, the puck come to Bill Hite, and he scored. And he told me the story. In the old Buffalo odd, which is a great odd, it was a great building. Not too bad they tore that down. So he's looking at the bench, and he's looking at the door to go off. He didn't know whether to go off the ice or come to the bench. But at the end there, he was terrific. I mean, he said, "I'm going to tell you, I won't, if there's a breakaway, I will not leave that, and that's all I ask." Anyhow, I remember Bob Cole, and I put him on left wing, and everybody, what is he, nuts? He's scoring, like going nuts, scoring on right. And I had him on left wing, and I'll tell you the story, how he got on left wing. Now, he's a right-hand shot. And you very rarely you put a right-hand shot on left wing, because there's a lot of left wingers out there. Bob Cole, when he came in to talk, he was the slowest writer in the history of, but I really like Bob. And he'd write down, and he'd take his time writing Rick, and so trainers behind me, they're ready to go. So finally. And then Bob Cole got up to left after, I forget how long.
What's he writing?
He's writing the lineup.
Oh, really?
So he goes to the trainer to ask for the lineup.
No, he goes to the coaches.
Oh, okay.
And then he's writing the lineup. So when he gets up there, he'll know the lineups and the whole deal and everything like that. So he's writing in my office, and he's writing slower and slower. So and the trainers, they're ready to go. So then I get up and I said, "Wait a minute." I said to myself, I put Ricky Middleton on left wing, but I can't make Bob look bad. So I started him on left wing and he loved it and he didn't. I said, "You're playing left wing." He looked at me. What are you crazy? And he loved it because he told me after, when he cut around the guy, he'd have the whole net to shoot at. The same as the Rocket Richard. He was a left-hand shot. He used to cut around. He'd have the whole net to shoot at. And I got a picture of him walking. He beat the defenseman and but he'd have the whole net to shoot at. So I only played him once in a while on left wing. But that's the reason he used to play left wing once in a while, because Bob Cole used to write so slow. I remember when Harry came to me and said, "Do you want this guy named Middleton?" I said, "Do I want him?" And he says, "Well, he likes to party. He has a pretty good time." I said, "I'll straighten him out. Don't worry." I said, "Who does he want?" He said, "He wants Kenny Hodge." Whoa! Then I said, "Go ahead." And I think you have a clip of.
Well, we have. It was the trade was Kenny Hodge for Ricky Middleton, and so that was Harry Sinden and John Ferguson were the general manager.
And they were good friends too. They were like from Team Canada.
There's no friends when it comes to trading. I guess not. So we have a clip of John Ferguson, who was on the Grapevine, telling how that trade came about.
Everybody knows Ricky Middleton. Ricky told me when he was with New York Rangers that he'd come in late. Ricky was wont to do that, come in curfew. And he said, "We're in a hotel." So I go in, and I go in the ground floor underneath the parking lot. And he says, Fergie won't catch. He's terrified of Fergie. So he goes up and he hits the lobby, doors open, and you were standing there.
Oh, I'll never forget that. I did a sportsman's banquet out in Fraser Valley.
Yeah.
And I was coming back into the city. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, 3. He told me it was 2, the liar.
And so I get on the elevator, and I'm going up, and goes down the basement. I go down the basement. I'm mad because I'm going down the basement. I'm going upstairs. Guy slides on the elevator. And he sees me, ducks his head, right? I said, "What are you, a ghost or something?" So no, I'm looking at Middleton, and I said, "We got a 1 o'clock game tomorrow afternoon." And he looked at me, he said, "Yeah." He said, "I couldn't sleep." So anyhow, he gets off, goes to his room, and lo and behold, the worst trade in history.
Yeah.
I made it at the time, but it was a trade because I was still mad about this, right?
Yeah.
So we played next day, 1 o'clock in Vancouver, got beat, and I put him right in the starting lineup, let him play, right? And Ricky was a good player.
Oh, he was.
But, and that was a time when I had Phil in New York, Esposito, and Phil kept telling me all summer, "You get me Hodgie, and I'll get back to my 50 goals," right? So I fell for the trap, and Kenny Hodge was winding down his career.
Winding down?
Yeah.
Winding down?
Like the watch stopped.
Yes.
Anyhow.
Winding down, all right.
So now I make this awful trade, Jock. I was a rookie manager at the time, making an awful trade like this. So I trade Kenny Hodge, former 50-goal scorer, for a young guy, Ricky Middleton, just starting his way up.
Yeah.
And I knew we were in trouble when Kenny Hodge gives the Ranger fans this one. Now, all the gallery guards are really on Kenny the rest of the season. And one night, we score a goal. At that time, it was Vickers scores the goal, they boo. Now this Ranger fans booing their own player. Gilbert assists, they cheer. And Hodge, they boo again. They booed 2/3 of their own goal.
The players used to call him Eddie. And if people remember, Eddie was the white-faced guy. He had chalk on his face. He was
from the Munsters. He was the little young werewolf on the Munsters who was all white.
Yeah, he was all.
And he kind of had hair like.
Yeah, he kind of looked, and now that I look, he did look like, they used to call him Eddie. So he had to have bonus, and I said, I'm getting him that bonus near the end of this.
And what was the bonus?
No, I don't know. He needed a point for a pretty good bonus. And I said, now look, this game, we're going to beat doesn't mean anything. We're going to beat Toronto. And don't jump on the ice and make a big deal about when he gets the bonus. Because I said, Harry Sinden is up, watch, and he'll know right away what. So I played him and played him and played him. And he got the bonus. Sure enough, all the players jumped on the ice. And I
remember because it was a nothing goal.
It was nothing.
I remember watching that game and it was like a nothing goal. It was like we won 6-1 or something. He got and the guy goes, "We have to check our stats. This must be something a milestone for Ricky Middleton."
That reminds me, Dad, of when Miller got the 11th. He was the 11th scorer, and everyone couldn't understand why everyone was jumping up
I
and
must
down.
go into that sometime. That's a good one.
But then Harry went.
So now we come in, and in the dressing room, and I said, "Now shut up, you guys. When Harry comes in, don't make a big deal of me getting his bonus and everything like that." So they wouldn't really start yelling. And so they soon as Harry came in, they started to go Ed E, Ed E, Ed E. And I tell you, we had a lot of fun. But, you talk about, the Hall of Fame, and absolutely ridiculous he's not in the Hall of Fame. They call him Nifty, and everybody called him Nifty because he was so nifty. And, I mean, he had 20, it's unbelievable. He had 7 years, he had 30 goals. 5 years, he had 40. He had 51 goals 1 year. He had 100 points. And if you count the playoffs, he had over 500 goals. He had over 1,000 points if you count the playoffs, and you've got some more stats, Tim, over there.
Yeah, he still holds a record. Like if you say who holds the record for the most points in a playoff series, everybody would think Gretzky or Lemieux or Crosby, everything. But he did in 1983 playoffs. He had 33 points in 17 games, and in that year Boston played Buffalo. Remember, went to 7 games, and he had 19 points. In 7 games, which is still a record. 3 All-Star games, 2 Canada Cups. He won the Lady Byng, was the Rookie of the Year in the American Hockey League. Played 14 years, only missed a playoffs 3 times. It's just
and terrific. And to watch him, and they call him Nifty.
And he's not in the Hall of Fame.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyhow. That's Ricky Middleton, and
well, I got to think. We got to tell about. I think one of the biggest goals he scored was he just played 6 games against LA, right?
Yeah.
And they were going into Philly.
Oh yeah,
and so we're going into overtime. And tell that was.
I forget the goaltenders now.
I think it was Wayne Stevenson played the whole game, and so I think it was 3-3 or 4-4 or something. And for some reason, Freddie Sherrill put in Bernie Parent.
Yeah, and Bernie been sitting there the whole game. His legs must have been like lead. So I called Ricky over. I says, "Look, we're going to get the face off, and I'm going to get it to you. You know how you..." And he could really flip the puck good. He knew how to... He was a magician with the puck. And he flipped the puck, and I mean, from the face off, and sure enough... It bounced in front, and Bernie Parent put the puck in his own net for the winner. I never forgot that. And Ricky...
I remember you always told Ricky to go wide on guys, because at the start you said he had a bad habit of always going at the defense.
He'd go right at the guy, and I said, if I put you on the St. Lawrence River and there was nobody within 100 miles of you, you'd go right at the guy. I said, go away from him. And he went away from him. But... I never forgot that goal. That was a big goal.
That put us up 1, and then the next game went to double overtime.
Oh, and then Terry scored. Yeah. And I never forgot that. When they beat us out the year before, and they were a pretty good club. They had a tough club, and I remember Jean Rattel. What a great guy he was. Jean, he was like Belleville. I can't describe it anymore than that. John Belleville. And it hit his skate and went out front, and the guy put it in. And I remember Sherrill saying, and we all felt bad for Jean because, he was that was the type of guy. He's we used to practice, and Freddie Sherrill said, we used to practice that every game. And so after Terry put it in and double overtime, I said, we used to practice that every game.
Well, do you remember what happened? I remember that because you came home. And the team came home, and back then you could go to the gate to meet beat, it's like the security was no security back then in 78, whatever it was. So all the wives are going. I remember Diana McNabb.
Yeah, Diana McNabb. She come up. She says, "That was a great game, Grapes." And I said, "Yeah, I outcoached them again." And she hit me with the purse. She was tougher than Peter.
Well, you want to tell that story about Diana? You got into a coaching philosophy because I think she was a coach of a high school ski team.
I don't know.
Well, it was a high school ski team, and you said you were talking to her, and she says, "Well, I only can have so many kids on the team, and I had to cut the team. I have to cut." And you said, "Well, how do you cut them?" And she says, "Well, I put their name on a sheet on the paper, and they come out in the hall to see who made it." And you really gave her heck, saying, "You got to go look them eye to eye and cut them."
Yeah, I remember a guy named Dougie Gibson that we brought up from Rochester. And I had Andy Savard, and never got back. He went to Quebec and he got caught in a snowstorm. And we brought Dougie up and Dougie Gibson. And he was the MVP for Rochester. And I think he got a couple of goals. And I had to go. I had to go up and tell him face to face that he was going back down again. I never forgot that. That was a tough. But you had to. The worst. I never ever had it happen to me, but I used to see it happen to other guys when they'd walk in and the coach never had the guts to tell the guy, and sweater wouldn't be there. No, the guy had the morning skate. He had the steak and everything. He had his nap and everything, and he walks in, his sweater's not there. I used to think, what a gutless coach.
Well, we went on to sweep Philly. We won the next two games. I remember.
Let's tell about that. That was a great series too. We must tell about that series.
Yeah, with Terry hitting Bobby Clark behind the net, and we'll get into that. But you wonder what people think in the Hockey Hall of Fame. How Ricky Middleton. There's a couple other guys we'll talk about that are in the Hall of Fame, but a guy like Ricky Middleton, who the players called nifty, is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Just
boggles the mind.
Boggles the mind.